Welcome to Trader Genius. You've got Jess and Rob to do your trade reviews for 9 August 2019. We'll start with the long-term multi-decade chart. Open that up. And Jess, what are you seeing on this long-term chart?
On the multi-decade long-term chart, I am seeing an interesting kind of development as far as this candle right here, the last weekly candle that we've had. Down here at the bottom, we don't have signal on. So no green, no red, it's just white with a blue candle right here. And as we look at each weekly review, and this is something that I do every day that I trade, is really just going across time frames, because as we spoke about before, continuity across time frames is really important in managing risk in the stock market. If we move to the monthly chart, on the monthly chart, we can see here when we're talking about continuity, we've got a green background with a red downtrend. It looked like it hit some resistance back on the 31st of July and has not recovered from that. Hit a ceiling, and just like a ball, it's bouncing off that ceiling and heading on its way down. So we're red on green. And if we look at the weekly chart, we just entered this week to red on red. We've got a little bit of a support line here, but it is seems like it may be going through that. Who knows if it'll hold or how far it'll go or which direction. So we'll just wait for it to kind of prove it to us. But currently, not making anything complicated, red on red. So we have a downtrend with a down signal. And with the daily chart, same scenario kind of as the weekly. Red on red, and we've got this little bit of support line right here. And we'll just wait to see what develops. It's been interesting. Had a nice big downtrend that triggered the green signal, turned to red, and kind of worked its way back up about 50%-ish of that overall length of that downtrend, and kind of going on its way back down. So we'll keep an eye out for next week, see if it rebounds or continues on its way down.
Recording. Good analysis, Jess, and it's always helpful, no matter what kind of time frame you're trading, you should know what the overall market is doing, even if it's just a glance. And luckily, you don't have to get into the charts necessarily. There are these indicators right here on the market tab of the program, and they'll tell you basically what is the read on the overall market. And it's even got a text-based kind of warning for you. And it's in your best interest to heed this warning. The market's not trending, so mediocre probability for success. Review your short-term positions in 1 to 3 days. No matter what time frame you're trading, it's helpful to check out these warnings, look at the overall market picture, and see where the general conditions lie before you get into a trade, and also when reviewing your portfolios. So let's take a look at our first trade for this week. We'll get our weekly movers watch lists. Remember, watch lists are where you can keep track of any different strategy or trading system you have. You can have multiple lists running at any time. The world's your oyster. Design the list however you want. We're going to get our weekly trade reviews, and we'll get those up right here. Our weekly movers. First one up for daily consideration is PERI. That's the Perion Network. You'll notice if you start off at the top, as we usually do, growth rating is 6. Really nice. And pick this one as a daily candidate because look at just the green trend that it's had. It's grown from $3 on July 9th all the way to $5.25 on August 9th. And actually it came on the daily dozen on this candle, 7/15/2019 at $4 flat. And if you look at that, that's 25 days. If you had gotten in here, this nice steep trend up, and you would have gotten out at 525 today. That's a gain of 31.25% in only 25 days. And you might not necessarily have held it that entire time, but you would have had a healthy gain here when it crossed the trend line and or even when the signal came off, you would have been making a profit. Brought this one up also because it is a pretty good fresh trend, breaking above that $5 mark on Thursday and a little bit of retesting on Friday, the 9th. But I like what I see here because that wick actually went down below $5, Jess, found some support. So that gives me a little bit of extra confidence that this is a decent candle to get in on. The trend is still relatively fresh, and it had found some support at $5. The bears tried to take it down, but the buyers were still with it, and it actually gained like a cent. So this one's a pretty good one just for consideration. If it fits your system, you've got the right indicators on for a lot of systems. You got a new trend line starting. It's even steeper angle. You've got K-band, and you've got signal with J-stop. So a lot of that is pointing towards, and the volume too. Let's not forget the Sidekick volume. It had a spike to start, coincided with the K-band and signal. And that is still exceptional volume if the purple histogram's on, but it's not spiking yet, so I don't see the trend ending. What do you see, Jess?
I see one of the things that I like is especially that $5 holdup. And it not only did it get support at $5, but it found support almost at the closing price of the previous candle. So that's a really good sign that overall people believe that this is a $5, at least a $5 stock. And it's kind of just up from there. $5 is a sticking point, especially for some of these penny stocks coming out of the few dollar range and breaking into the $5 range. I also like that it's above the old longer trend line. So it's starting its new trend line, but it's pushed above the longer trend line that was previously established. And the proof is in the pudding. Came up on the daily dozen. The 15th came up on the 15th, and there was some gains made. And so some of that stuff is repeatable as far as our software and our system does a good job of kind of picking these opportunities. Now, does that mean that's 100% guaranteed? Definitely not, but it's nice to see that it did work. And so moving forward, there's a little bit of confidence with that. One of the things I'd like to look at, Rob, is do we have any known resistance above this?
Let's look at across timescales. Weekly, looking pretty good, clear to the left. Nothing in that $5 range. Monthly, yeah, we've got a little bit. So it's been a while, but the last time it was in this territory above $5, it was on its way down. It was kind of sideways and then down about 2 years ago.
Roughly at the $6 kind of turnaround point. So that's still, what's that? Still 20% gain potential on that, depending on what your exit strategies are and how you kind of analyze the charts. But from a known resistance, looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty clean. You got $1 to go. There's some chop in here, so just watch it carefully. But this monthly chart looks great as well if you're a monthly stock trader. And an important thing, what you said, proof of concept on Daily Dozen, when we see things like this, remember when it pops up, it's not necessarily just because it's on the Daily Dozen that day, doesn't mean get in that day without thinking about it. No, the Daily Dozen the purpose of it is to alert you to stocks that are moving. Where is the action? And you could see Daily Dozen waited for about 5 days of a flurry of activity. Now, we don't care what happened with PERI on this day. Maybe it was some news or some fresh round of venture capital. Who knows? But it went back up, and that's what the Daily Dozen told you was like, hey, this thing is, has some power. So let's see where that power is going to take it. And lo and behold, it's growing. It may not be the prettiest chart, but get in when it fits your rules by confirming with the chart, not just because it's on the Daily Dozen. Let's transition to our weekly stock, which is DRD. I'll pull up the weekly chart. And Jess, you identified this ticker. What are you seeing with DRD Gold?
Well, DRD first came up on July 31st at $3.03 and has had a high of 408. So that's 34.65% in about 9 days. So that's a pretty significant mover. And I just thought I liked it a lot because some of the behavior that we can see in this stock. We had some good big movement prior to it coming up, but it broke that $3 mark. And then it kind of went flat and then had a big push. Now, with this one, as far as is it beginning a new trend, is it ending a new trend? That kind of depends on how you want to look at these charts. But one thing that's nice is we had higher highs throughout this process and then this big kind of push up to $4. It went up over $4 and has since retracted. So we'll have to wait and kind of see what it's going to do at the $4 mark. But the exciting part is that this is a pretty clean, nice, big, moving, growing, powerful trend. And I always like to tell people when things start looking really good, maybe change your expectations a little bit because maybe that's the end. Kind of depends on how the trend develops overall. But the big nice thing is we're way far away from this trend line. J-stop number is really high, K-band, and we got volume genius coming on. So all in all, DRD Gold, for when it came up on the Daily Dozen, really proved to be an exciting stock for just a week time, or a little bit over a week time frame, to really capitalize on an opportunity.
And when you're evaluating stocks across timeframes like this, let's just say you're watching this video and you've never traded a stock before, but you're interested, you've always wanted to. The way to build a system where you consider multiple timeframes is very simple, and it can actually be fun. Like, you just need to figure out how much importance you're going to assign to the longer term trend. Like, we covered the market and how that's moving. So what's happening with the general conditions, and then just look at it across time scales and figure out what time scales you're comfortable with. If you're good checking in on DRD on a daily basis, then yeah, getting in here on August 1st, right after it came up, that's a nice trend. Okay, so you put a lot of weight into that. You confirm across the weekly time scale, but if you want to be in and out within a couple days, well, just emphasize the daily and give that more weight. Or you can just say, I don't really care what the time frames are, just 2 out of 3 need to be met at all times on conditions X, Y, and Z. You identify the indicators for those. So get creative with it, do some testing, and figure out what your personality fits with as far as what time frames to trade.
Good point, Rob. With the time frames, it's important to have an idea getting into that stock what time frame you're going to stick with and stay with it throughout. For instance, if you were deciding to make a trade on a monthly time frame and ended up looking at an hourly chart, it may cause you to get out prematurely because it's allowing you to see more noise than you need to see for that time period that you've selected for trading. So once you kind of pick your time frame that you're going to make your decisions off of, you can use the other charts for reference points to help kind of make up that decision for that chart you're looking at. But sticking with a single chart in particular to prompt your decision making really allows you to be more consistent in your trading.
It gives you clear priorities. For DRD here, I had the investor chart up on a different screen, and we were looking at this as a weekly. So, okay, looks really nice on the weekly. If you looked on too far of a time scale, you might not trade it weekly because you get turned off by where it used to be back in the mid 90s. Used to be up in the mid hundreds. So it doesn't look that great on the eye chart, but that doesn't mean it can't fit your rules for a shorter term trade, even monthly. It's starting to take off at that volume spike, and it's getting up there now. There's some looking left. It doesn't look that clean, but still a candidate. Don't let one kind of pull of the timescales throw you off and get you off of your system. Define what time frame is best for you, and like you said, that's the one that you're going to prioritize over the rest.
And our rating system really helps kind of establish that. So right now it's sitting at a growth rating of 6. And so that's really drawing or pulling you towards a shorter time frame, and that's reflected directly in these charts that we're looking at for DRD.
Yet another gold stock picking up from where we left off last week.
Yeah.
And finally, our long-term trade to review is IPHI. That is, I'm just going to take a stab at that. Infi, I guess, would be the semiconductor company. Infi, something like that. Whatever. IPHI, good-looking stock. And in this case, it popped up on the Daily Dozen on July 15th. So inside that candle, I'll just go to the daily, check out where it was on July 15th. And right there, it was just flirting with that $60 mark, and it had a nice trend up, went a little bit sideways. Now it's trending again. So here on 715, you could see it was touching. It closed at 59.72. So the high was 60.13. If we take that to today, Friday the 9th, and you look at the high of 64.97. So if you got out here on this red candle, that would be a 8.79% gain in 25 days. So pretty good for a single month of trading. And if we cross-reference that with the monthly chart, which is where I really want to look for IPHI, I am less concerned about the past trade getting in on the 15th and getting out on the 9th. I am more intrigued by the possibility of IPHI going forward. So we start with our weight ratings again. Growth rating is a 6 out of a possible 7. Investing is even a 1. So it's looking a little bit better on the long term for me. I wish it had a little bit better financials, but if we look at the charts itself, I'm just going to pull up the investor chart, which helps us confirm an even longer period of time. This monthly chart will take us back to 2015, which you can't fit that many candles in this. But if we take the investor chart, pull that over, you can see we're all the way back to 2010, more context, and IPHI is taking off. And Jess, we talk about, especially when we see where the Dow Jones is these days, we talk about that double top, triple top kind of formation. Well, IPHI had a decision to make, put it that way. The buyers and sellers had a decision to make about IPHI. It had a top here in 2017, last spring, kind of second quarter, and it went down, bottomed out in 2018, and it approached that area in June of this year. And then it could have bounced back down and gone in a cyclical pattern, but instead gapped up a little bit, and looks like IPHI is running up. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're on the second candle of kind of a fresh trend after a breakout from, I mean, this isn't a 52-week high. This is a 104-week high or whatever it is. Looking at an all-time high, at least based on this chart. And it's early enough to still be a good potential for it to carry or have some more momentum to keep going. So I do like that aspect on this investor chart.
And we talk about past performance. It has held to the trend lines pretty well throughout its growth phases. So for this one, when the signal turns green, for the most part, we're getting it to follow those trend lines. Look, this is a nice slope as well. And one thing to notice a little bit different about this trend is it does have some volume, and in the distance, it's created for itself away from these trend lines. And if we pull this down, we'll take the investor chart away, take a look at some of the indicators we have for evaluating these monthly stocks. Again, it's creating distance from the trend line, and the T-stop is also way back down. T-stop helps you set your trailing stop for a stock like this that's trending up. And J-stop, as well as this little arrow, the further away it is from that arrow, see here it's pretty close to the arrow, here it started to get some separation from the arrow, and that makes the J-stop number even stronger. So I'd like to see some better financials for a longer term, like an investor style hold on this. But for a monthly trade, you could hardly do better than a setup like this with an all-time breakout. And yeah, that was 106 months, an 8-year all-time high.
One of the things too here that I see, it may be a little bit early, but there's also, this is in a increasing or growing situation on the quarterly chart. On the quarterly chart too, we're getting switch over into the green and we're on that second candle. So I like it. I like where it's going. Yeah, I do agree. Financials leave a little bit to desire, but at the same time, growing companies and in growth situations, they could be flipping that around or really coming up with something big, or just all it takes for a company like this is one major contract to bring it up. And especially when we're talking on the monthly, we're not talking, oh, we're going to hold it for 3 months or 6 months or a year. We're purely just looking at the charts and looking at opportunities. And as far as a monthly opportunity, this has a lot of positive factors behind it.
Agreed. And it's easy to fall into the trap that, IPHI has been around for 8 years. Maybe they should know what they're doing and they should be growing by now. But we know how hard it is to run a business. We run our own trading businesses, and it takes a while. Sometimes you just need to get some traction. They're touching $65 right now. There's really no ceiling. There's not a ton of resistance in sight going up.
If you need a little extra confirmation for this to be kind of a monthly, is again, we're referencing these other time frames to be able to find our points, like an entry point or an exit point, and get a little bit of not market timing, but timing as it relates to the behavior of that stock on different time frames. So if we look at the daily, right now it's showing that maybe it's going to hitting a little resistance at 65. So be prudent. There's no rush. If this gives you a bit of a pause for a line of resistance, then let it prove it to you that it's going to get through that 65 again and then get in. There's always the potential for that. So being patient, not rushing to judgment, and following your trading process is what's going to allow for that consistency in trading that you're looking for, to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do with your trading account and trading dollars.
Great thoughts. And just one last thing, confirm with the market. Let the market, the overview that we did at the beginning of this video, go back to that and let those charts support your move. Let those show you at least some green, set some rules for yourself in your own trading system about market agreement, because you do want the market behind you, or at least not working against you when you enter a long position like this for growth.